My name is Kelly Dougherty. I served for 8 years in the Colorado Army National Guard. I was enlisted as a medic and later deployed twice, once to the Balkans and once to Iraq as military police. When my unit, the 220th Military Police Company from the Colorado Army National Guard, got orders to deploy to Iraq, I was actually serving in a headquarters detachment as a medic and was involuntarily transferred to the military police company to be deployed to first Kuwait and then later to Iraq as a military police sergeant. We arrived in Kuwait on February 22nd of 2003 before the invasion started, and went into Iraq late March of 2003 and stayed there until February of 2004. During the time that I was in Iraq, our unit did primarily 2 different missions. One was convoy escort and the other was patrols. And one of the main things that we were tasked with was to escort convoys of KBR, or Kellogg Brown and Root, which is a major U.S. contractor that the military is employing in Iraq to do a variety of different jobs. And we escorted their vehicles from fuel tankers, flatbed trucks, trailer trucks, from Kuwait, bases on Kuwait, to various military bases in Iraq that were going from base to base to bring fuel and supplies to the different bases. We initially were patrolling in southern Iraq, south of Talil Air Base, which is where we were stationed, which is by the city of Nasiriyah. And we had several months in the summer of 2003 where that was our main patrol area. But then later in the summer, late August or early September in 2003, our patrol route changed and became much more just doing patrols and not doing as many convoy escorts north of where we were. And when we started moving more towards that mission, one of the things we started seeing a lot more of were problems with the KBR trucks, that they would break down a lot, they would get in accidents a lot. And so one of our main jobs as military police was to secure the vehicles from the Iraqi civilians so that they wouldn't loot them. And for us as military police, we're told when we get into Iraq and when we're getting on these convoy missions that these trucks, they're a U.S. asset, they're something that needs to be protected with force, deadly force if necessary, because it's a strategic asset to our military presence in the country. So when these vehicles would break down, initially when we would escort the convoys in southern Iraq and they would break down, a lot of times it was not a very populated area. It was pretty remote and sparse. So we would let the drivers try to fix the vehicles if they could. Sometimes they were able to after a lot of waiting around. But then when we started patrolling further north, it became much more densely populated. There were a lot of villages. Basically, once you went north of Nasiriyah on a highway that was called MSR Jackson, which there are 2 main supply routes that the U.S. military uses in southern Iraq, and the first is called MSR Tampa, or Highway 1, and that's a large highway in the south. But as you go north, many convoys were rerouted to MSR Jackson, which is much smaller. It's a 2-lane road that goes through a lot of villages, a lot of cities, pretty much all the way up to Diwania, which is south of Baghdad, was where all of these convoys would drive on MSR Jackson, and where we were tasked to patrol and to guard the convoys if they would break down or get stuck in the mud or have a traffic accident. And what we did repeatedly, and it got to be pretty much on a daily basis when we were on patrols in that sector, when a KBR truck would break down, the standard procedure for the convoy is that you don't stop the convoy because it has to keep going. There are a lot of people and vehicles around. If a whole convoy stops, this could be dozens of semi-trucks all driving slowly in a row, and when you stop, it creates a huge traffic problem and also makes a target out of everyone in those vehicles that are stopped. So when the truck would break down, a driver would jump out, get into another vehicle and go, and then leave the vehicle there, and we would get called out to guard it. And of course, these were populated areas, and there were a lot of Iraqi civilians who were living in abject poverty who would come and try to get things off of the vehicles and loot them, whether it was for the cargo that was on the vehicles. A lot of time they were fuel tankers, or the tires, or the doors, or pretty much strip the entire vehicles and use whatever they could, even if it was just scrap metal, to use or to sell. So we would go there to guard the vehicles. A lot of times we would get into physical altercations, and the escalation would rise between us and the civilians. It was definitely one of those experiences where you just feel apprehension every day going out, because you know you're probably going to have to get into a crowd control situation that day, and you're just kind of waiting for that time when someone in the crowd fires an AK-47 or something like that, because we knew that many Iraqis were armed, and we're just kind of anticipating that to happen. Luckily, in our instance, that had never happened with me or my team, but what would happen is we would wait there, radio back, say, we have a KBR truck broke down here, and we need someone to come in and recover it. And a lot of times it would be things like flat tires or just different mechanical things, or they would just, like I said before, be stuck in the mud or something like that. So we would be guarding these against civilians, and the crowds would always get bigger and bigger, and we were trying to keep them back, and we couldn't communicate with them. And then eventually what would happen is we would get a call back on the radio saying, well, they can't get anyone to come out and recover the vehicle, so just leave it. And so we were getting these two very conflicting set of orders. One, this vehicle is a U.S. asset. It's worth protecting, even if it means killing someone else to keep them away from it. And then B, yeah, well, all that stuff we just told you, never mind. Just leave the vehicle, continue with your mission. And that was a pretty much daily occurrence some of the weeks that we were patrolling, specifically in the fall and winter of 2003 and into 2004, where we were abandoning vehicles by KBR contractors on a daily basis. And it was very frustrating for us, because we knew the drill, we knew what would happen, we knew we would get called out, have to guard these vehicles, keep the civilians back, and then would just leave them. And many times before we left the vehicles, we would be ordered to destroy them so that the Iraqis couldn't use them or couldn't drive them or couldn't use the stuff that was on them. And so one particular incident I remember was I was with my team, which were two other military police officers and another team, and there were two fuel tankers, and they had got into an accident, and they were off the side of the road, and they were both full of diesel fuel, and there were Iraqis from the local village, hundreds of Iraqis on the perimeter waiting to get the fuel from these vehicles. And the area that we were in, of course, in all of Iraq, the regular people there don't have access to fuel. Like, they can't just go to the gas station. They have to stand in lines and wait in lines and push their cars because they're out of gas in fuel lines that stretch for miles, just to get some inflated, expensive fuel. So here we were with two huge fuel tankers, and at this time we'd been issued what we call less than lethal ammunition. These are things like rubber bullets and concussion grenades and beanbag shots for the shotgun. So we were there doing crowd control, keeping people back from these fuel tankers. Escalations were the tension was really rising because we're all feeling very nervous because we were so outnumbered, and people kept trying to come forward, and then the other team, their gunner was firing pretty frequently and pretty indiscriminately with the beanbag shots with the shotgun into the crowd, which it sprays out all these little shot pellets, and I mean, I've never been shot with one, but from the reaction of the Iraqis getting shot with them, I assume that it hurt a lot. And also firing concussion grenades into the crowd to cause the people to disperse. And, you know, they're Iraqis of all ages. I mean, they're all men, but there are boys there too, and old men. And, you know, when we got issued the ammunition, we had to sign these statements saying that we understood that it was to be used in a similar situation as deadly force, because that it could kill someone if it was a young person or if it hit someone in the face or things like that. So there was this possibility of death, but you know, it became to be pretty indiscriminate and pretty frequently that people in the unit would use this less than lethal ammunition during crowd control. So we were, and you know, those were our orders. We have to keep these people back. And then